This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy. Yeah, man. So the way I normally start this thing out is just ask you guys to introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself, who you are and that kind of thing. And that'll help us preface the conversation, I feel like. And I know when we talked originally, I think there was a lot of good things we touched on. And especially I think this whole concept of, hypnotherapy is interesting to a lot of people. And I think it's probably obvious why. But I'm curious to get into this, man. I don't know. I guess I'll maybe let you introduce yourself first before I say too much into it. But whatever you think is relevant, however you want to get started.
Well, like you said, I am a hypnotherapist, and I know that has a lot of baggage around it. Let me get back to my screen. There you go. That has a lot of baggage around. There's a lot of misconceptions, unfortunately, a lot of myths around it, because I think it prevents a lot of people from even exploring the possibilities of what this can help people with. And I'll maybe get my story a little bit later, but in terms of the work of therapeutic hypnosis, let's just dive right in and talk about what it is and what it isn't. And it's really not about controlling other people. You can't control another person, no matter what you see on the movies, no matter what you see on TV, no matter what maybe you've gone to one of those Las Vegas shows or into a comedy club. It's not about controlling over. You can't control another person. It's about giving back control. And the best definition I've ever heard of hypnotherapy is by Dr. Irving Kirsch, who calls it a non-deceptive placebo. Now, of course, we know about the placebo, especially around research. So say a pharmaceutical company is doing research on a high blood pressure medication. Half the research group is going to be the control group getting the sugar pill, some sort of medication, some sort of pill that has no medicinal value whatsoever, because they know people will use mind to heal the body. They know mind can heal the body. They literally have to account for that in their research. So half the group is going to get the sugar pill, and the other half, of course, is going to get the real medication. They're going to see how people heal, how people get better, hopefully with the medication, so therefore they can put it on the market. Let's say, just to make, for this example, 30% of the people in the control group get better, healing themselves through their own mind because they think they're getting the real medication. They're tricking themselves into healing themselves. 30% get better through mind alone, through their own healing potential. The people getting the real medication, 40% get better. Well, they have to subtract 30% because maybe they got better through mind alone too. The medication had nothing to do with it. So really only 10% got better, and that's good enough. We'll put it on the market at $50 a pill. Well, nobody looks at, but more people got better healing through their own mind, through their own bodies, because there's no big money in that. There's no billion-dollar windfall in teaching people how to heal with their own minds. You can't patent somebody's healing potential. You can't copyright somebody's, subconscious mind. And so Dr. Irving Kirsch calls hypnotherapy a non-deceptive placebo, because we're not going to trick you into healing yourself. You're going to heal yourself on purpose. And I don't fix anybody. I don't fix anybody. Hypnotherapy really in and of itself doesn't fix anybody. You fix yourself. And it's your intention on what you want to do that creates the healing. It's your motivation. It's your focus on what you want to work on. Even if you don't know what the core issue is, you might just come in and say, I just have all this anxiety. I don't know why. That's all we need to work with. Because now your subconscious mind can focus on, okay, where's this feeling state coming from? The amount of effort your brain, your body has to go through to create anxiety, creating the adrenaline, the cortisol, moving 300% more blood to the big muscles of your arms to fight this danger, 300% more blood to escape the danger. It's got to come from somewhere. So it's turning down the power in your immune system. That's why people get sick when they're stressed. Turning down the power on your digestive system. No need to digest that sandwich so you have energy in 7 hours if you're in danger right now. And so that's why people get irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, because they're turning down the power of the digestive system. The amount of effort to turn on this stress response, to feel that anxiety or that anger or that worry or overwhelm is pretty extraordinary. So you know why you're doing it. It just doesn't happen all the time. I mean, maybe there's some very, very, very rare cases when somebody could say, yeah, they're constantly anxious 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a very rare case and something seriously wrong there. But in terms of just our day-to-day lives, our chronic anxiety or chronic anger, you know why you're doing it, because it doesn't happen all the time. It's only being triggered here and there, maybe a lot, but not all the time. And while you may not consciously know why you're doing it, subconsciously you do it within the unconscious. And so what's amazing and brilliant about hypnotherapy is that we don't use conscious mind to try to figure out your problem. And I think that's why people spin their wheels in talk therapy, is because they don't know what the core issue is. They don't know what happened to create this feeling state, or this depression, this sadness, this grief, this sorrow. And so they just spin their wheels talking about what happened at work or what's happening in the relationship. And yes, those are problems that need to be talked about. But the reason they're there for 80, 90, 100 sessions over 2 years and still hurt and they're still in pain is because they don't know what the real problem is. And they're looking outside of themselves to another person to fix them. They don't know what's wrong. And so maybe this person can tell me what's wrong and tell me how to fix it. And they don't know. How would they know?
Right.
And so that's why it's taking so long, trying to dive in deep. You know what the problem is. That's why you're creating this armor to protect yourselves. You know what you're protecting yourself from in the unconscious. And that's what's so stunning about this work, is by bypassing that conscious level of mind and accessing that unconscious part of mind, you can heal. You're allowed to do that. And it doesn't have to take a long time either. You know, healing happens in an instant. Now, there may be some setup, some lead up to that healing. But in terms of healing, in terms of change, it happens in an instant. Just like that trauma was installed in an instant. And God forbid, maybe somebody grew up in an abusive household. And maybe the safest way to live in an abusive household was to hide, keep yourself small, snuff out your light. That was the way to keep yourself safe. That was probably the best thing you could have done as a child. And so you install those instructions. Well, you're allowed to change those. And if there was abuse, maybe there is a car accident or a natural disaster or something, that trauma gets installed within an instant. So why wouldn't you be able to heal it in an instant? Who told you you couldn't? And what is it to their benefit that you don't heal really quickly? And so I believe in the power of the mind, and that's what's so stunning about this. It's work.
Yeah. Okay. So this is fascinating because I just want to make sure I'm following this correctly here, because I want to address a misconception that I think is a very common misconception, where you said that this hypnosis or hypnotherapy is not like what we see in the movies. It's not like you're, dangling what is it? They use a watch or whatever, somebody, it's not like that. I think what you said, if I'm understanding correctly, is you basically help the person with what they already believe, whether it's unconscious or conscious, and you help that person heal through the beliefs they already have. Is that correct? Even if they're not aware they have them?
Sort of like we're not going to do anything you're not already doing already, if that makes any sense. You're already hypnotized to a certain extent. If you're creating anxiety and you don't know why, you're literally changing your physiology, changing your brain chemistry to an unknown trigger, to an unknown threat. You've already hypnotized yourself. And so it's not that you can't be hypnotized. You already are. You're already out of control. What we're going to do is give you back control. And by accessing the information you installed, and not to blame the person, not to blame the victim, not to say it was their fault, but the child or the teenager or the person in their 20s or 30s or 40s, you're the one who installed those instructions on how to keep yourself safe. And that actually becomes very empowering, because if you're the one who installed them, then you're the one who can change them. And that's where this becomes quite safe and gentle and easy to do, because we're looking to you, the person who created this armor, to remove it. And you're not looking outside of yourself. And so the thing with one, we're all to a certain extent hypnotized, and we can all move into this hypnosis state. I think that what trips up a lot of people, and is really unfortunate, is the word hypnosis, because we see the movies and the TV shows, and it's not some we're not going to turn anybody into some sort of voodoo zombie, or we're not going to like hypnotize like Jason Bourne to assassinate the prime minister or anything. That's not what this is. If you've ever had the experience of just drifting off during a meeting, a boring meeting, and you start thinking about the weekend, and you got people coming over, I gotta get the house together, or oh my God, I got that presentation next week, and I got to redo the PowerPoint, and I got to get more numbers and information. You start daydreaming and not paying attention to where you are in the moment. You've just put yourself in the state of hypnosis. You just altered your state of consciousness. Just like maybe me back in high school math class, and I'm paying attention. It's going to be on the final exam. I got to do well. And so I'm paying attention. I'm taking notes. I'm trying to concentrate. And I'm in the beta brainwave state, firing about 18 cycles per second, just literally how fast the neurons are firing in my head. And they fire in a wave-like fashion, so they go from back to front to back again. That's one wave. Consciousness, what you and I are in now, Cody, firing about 18 cycles per second. And then this is just so boring for me back in high school. And I'm just like, I can't take this anymore. I start drifting off and doing one of these, and I'm staring out the window and I'm thinking about the weekend and how much fun I'm going to have. I've just altered my state of consciousness. I've turned off the external world. I'm not hearing the teacher. The teacher's still talking. Kids are still asking questions and talking. I've moved inward, and now I'm daydreaming about the weekend and how much fun, or the thing I got to do next month, or the vacation I took a year ago. I've moved inward, altered my state of consciousness, and moved down to the alpha brainwave state, maybe firing about 12 cycles per second. And then I'm staring out the window and I'm thinking about how much fun I'm going to have in the weekend. And I start doing one of these. My eyes start closing and my head's nodding down. I'm not really asleep, but I'm not really awake either. And now I'm moving down to the theta brainwave state, maybe firing about 6 cycles per second. Pretty soon, I've altered my state of consciousness again. Pretty soon, I'm going to be in the delta brainwave state, maybe firing at 1 or half cycle per second. But instead, the teacher sees me and says, "Hey, Craig, why don't you come up here and do the problem on the board?" And so I jolt awake and I'm looking around. Everybody's staring at me. I'm embarrassed. I don't know how to do the problem on the board. I don't know what I'm going to do going up there. Now I'm stressed. I'm firing about 30 cycles per second in the fight or flight response. In just this, 7-8 minute time period of me back in high school math class, I've altered my state of consciousness 3 or 4 times. And you do this consistently all day long. All we do is access your ability to do that and do it on purpose. That alpha theta brainwave state is a very influential, suggestive brainwave state. That's why it's very concerning about what movies you're watching, what TV shows you're watching, what podcasts you're listening to, because watching TV puts you in the alpha brainwave state. And so if you've ever been watching a movie and it's a very exciting adventure, action-packed movie, and you get excited and the movie's blaring and you get a little stressed because you don't know if they're going to be able to jump the canyon or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, they did it. You've hypnotized yourself to create a reaction. If it's a sad movie, you cry and then everybody dies at the end or whatever. It's evoking an emotion of you, and you've tricked yourself into creating a change within your brain chemistry to relate to what's happening. You're being influenced by the movie, because just watching TV, watching a movie puts you in the alpha brainwave state, a very influential state of mind and body. And so we just do that on purpose. You're doing it anyway. We just do it on purpose. And now a lot of people, we kind of talked about a little bit, those Las Vegas shows, the hypnotist shows, or the comedy clubs, or maybe seen it on YouTube or late night talk shows or something. People are singing like Elvis Presley, or hypnotized to dance like Michael Jackson, or quack like a duck, or bark like a dog, or pretend they're on a roller coaster or something. All this work that we do in hypnotherapy is about your intention. I can't control anybody. I can't make anybody quit smoking if they don't want to quit smoking. If you come to me, this has happened to me before. A while ago, a long time ago, someone came to me and wanted to quit wanted to do sessions to quit smoking, to show his wife that, nothing works, so I'll just smoke in the garage. He was using it he was paying good money as a negotiating ploy, so he could tell his wife that nothing works and he will have to smoke in the garage, because he didn't want to quit. I can't make him quit. I can't go into Las Vegas casinos or bars or wherever and just snappy, wavy, make people quit smoking. I can't go into prisons and hypnotize everybody to be law-abiding, upstanding citizens. I can't, hypnotize Elon Musk to write me $1 billion check. The reason I don't have $1 billion check from Elon Musk is because he doesn't want to write me one. Mm-hmm. And so it's about your intention. And going back to those shows, every single person that gets up on that stage volunteered to be there. They want to be there. That, Vegas shows, even the more unknown people, it's like $70-$80, to get into one of those shows. So they got to put on a good show. That's some good money. And so when you buy a ticket, you sit down in your seat, there are a bunch of people who volunteer to get up on that stage. Now, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be up there. Maybe Cody, you don't want to be up there. Maybe a lot of your listeners probably don't want to do that. I think that's horrifying to go up there. But there is a certain segment of our population that loves doing that. They find that fun. They're extroverts. They're exhibitionists. They want to have a good time. They want to get up there and just have fun. They want a silly video to put on TikTok or Instagram or something. They just want to be funny in front of their friends. And watch them. By the end of the show, they have a big smile on their face. Why? Because they're having a good time. Their intention is to entertain and to have fun. And they do. I mean, there's people who go up on those big old huge roller coasters that are, 90 degrees angles. I don't want to do that. I don't find that fun whatsoever. But there are people who enjoy that and will do it over and over and over again. Just as there's people who will volunteer to go up on a hypnotist stage and act silly and dance like Michael Jackson and sing like Elvis because they find that funny and they find that a good time. You can't make anybody do anything you don't want to do. And even if you watch those shows, like a video of it, at the very beginning, you'll watch the hypnotist is doing a test to make sure everybody can do the show. Because there's people who get up there and then, oh my God, there are 200 people are staring at them with bright lights and all videotaping everything and they get nervous. And if you're in that high rate of stress, they're firing at 30 cycles per second, you're not going to do a good show. You need to be down to that 16 cycle per second, 14, 12 cycle per second. And so they'll do a test. Not only will they do a test usually with the whole audience in some form or another. And then, okay, who wants to come up here and have a good time? And a bunch of people raise their hands. So he picks about 15 volunteers. And then they go down, what's your name? Where are you from? And you want to go into hypnosis, have a good time. Yes, yes, yes. They say yes like 7 times before they even start the show. And then they'll do a little test, a little technique like, all right, I want everybody to close their eyes and pretend, do the prayer position with your hands, pretend that your hands are super glued together and pretend you can't pull them apart. Just try to pull your hands apart and notice they're stuck. Everybody's like doing this and they can't pull their hands apart. And that one person does this, pulls their hands apart. They're off the stage. Because they're not going to do a good show. It's $80 to get into this show. And if somebody's doing this because they want to give the hypnotist a middle finger or tell them, oh, you can't hypnotize me, great. Don't be hypnotized. Get off my stage. Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to do a good show. And I'm here to entertain, and everybody else up here wants to entertain and have fun. So leave. I mean, they do it in a nice way, in a polite way. But you can't control anybody. You can't, if somebody comes to me and wants to quit smoking, they'll quit smoking. But I then can't hypnotize them to go rob a bank and we'll split the money at the end of the day because they don't want to. That's against their morals, against their ethics, so they won't. And a lot of this work isn't about diving into secrets and things. I've heard too much as it is. I don't need to hear your secrets. It's painful sometimes to hear a lot of that stuff. You heal yourself. I'll help facilitate. I'll lifeguard at the side of the pool. But you do the healing work. And sometimes this stuff can be done non-contextually, meaning we don't have to dive in deep into every single aspect of the hurt and pain you've been through because you know what it is. So let's just heal it. And it's sort of like, just really quickly, like a great analogy would be like, gripping onto a pin. Like we grip onto a pin very tightly with our fist. And after a while, we grip onto this pin so long that we think it's very familiar to us. And then it's becoming very comfortably miserable because we're just so tightly holding on to this pin. And then after a while, it's so familiar, it's so comfortable that we think this is who we are. But it's not. Just open your fist and drop the pin. Right? It can be that simple. Just drop the pen. And you don't need to know how a pen is made. You don't need to know what color ink it is. You don't need to know how ink is made or what ink even is. Just drop the pen. Maybe it's useful to know some of that information, but just drop the pen. And just as it can be installed that quickly, the trauma, why can't you heal it that quickly?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of things that I want to touch on right here.
Sure.
Let me backtrack for just a minute because we were talking about changing brain states and we were talking about the alpha, the beta. I think theta is one.
Yep.
I think I'm missing one.
Well, delta is sleep, and there's more in between. Now we're talking about there's gamma way up above, but that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different conversation. But
so when you're when you're driving and you just kind of zone out, is that alpha or is that okay? So all right,
it's that thing of, if you've ever had that experience, and a lot of people have, of driving home, and you get to within like 10 blocks of your house, and you start saying, oh my God, I got people coming over. I got family coming over. I got to get the house together. I got to get the shopping done. Or it's like, oh my God, I got that presentation on Monday and I got to get the PowerPoint done. And now the numbers are all wrong because of this new information. I got to spend this weekend doing that. And then all of a sudden you're in your driveway or you're in your garage or in your parking spot. You've moved yourself into a hypnagogic trance state, is a fancy term for the alpha and theta brainwave state. You move down into 12 cycles per second. Now, it's not unsafe because you know how to drive home. If you've lived there for several years, 365 days a year, you've driven home thousands of times. Just like you know how to tie your shoes, you know how to ride a bicycle, you know how to zip up your jacket, you know how to walk out down the street without going left foot, right foot, don't fall over. You can drive home because you've done it so many times. And so it's not unsafe. It's just that unconscious part of your mind took over. So your conscious part of mind can think about whatever task you need to accomplish, or, whatever chores you need to get done when you get home, and all of a sudden you're at your driveway. So again, it's not that we're doing anything different or unusual. We're doing exactly what you do already.
Right.
We're just doing it on purpose and for the intention of your healing or your growth.
Right. And that was kind of what I was leading up to, because we were talking about intention also. So we're talking about changing brain states. I guess you would call it that a state. Yeah. It's a state. And then we're talking about intention. So I feel like if we overlap these things, and I don't know enough about this to say, advocate for zone out, quote unquote, while you're driving. I don't want to say that.
No, don't do that.
I'll just say, like, if you're doing something and if you're, I guess it would be your unconscious mind takes over as far as the repetitive motions goes, whether it's, washing dishes or whatever it might be. What I'm trying to lead up to here is, can we use that time in a productive way instead of thinking about maybe some of these negative things, these things that might stress us out, the presentation or the shopping or whatever it is? Are we able to use that? Is that part of the healing process to use that time productive, whatever way that might be? Because I feel like this is a way to literally program our minds. I feel like this is what's going on.
Yeah. In fact, Richard Bandler, who is one of the co-founders of Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, maybe we talk about that in a little bit. But Richard Bandler says you can solve a lot of problems by overwhelming it with positive thoughts. The issue comes in that your subconscious mind is not here to make you happy. Your subconscious mind is here to keep you safe and protected. It's for your survival, which doesn't necessarily mean your happiness and your success. Maybe that's a part of it. But it's about protecting you from the threats in the world. And if you have been under some abuse, some bullying, some traumatic experiences, you have maybe armored yourself in a way that creates a lot of anger in men, depression, anxiety, stress, worry, overwhelm. And that's what's going to be at the forefront, because it's about your survival, not your happiness. Now, you can, and I just saw this great, I forget who did it, and I apologize to the person who put this out there, but on Instagram, someone was talking about having a glass of water and taking a teaspoon of dirt and stirring it around in there. It doesn't matter how much sugar you put in that water, it's not going to taste good. You have to get the dirt out. Then you have a clean glass of water, and then you can maybe put some sugar or whatever else you want in there. And so you can apply happiness and you have positive thoughts. And Richard Bandler says you can solve a lot of problems with positive thinking. But if there's some core issues of hurt and pain and wounding that happened that you may not even remember or consciously know about, that has to be cleared. Because you're consistently going to try to protect yourself from that. And look, we don't want to get rid of anxiety and fear. Fear is that thing that keeps us from walking down the dark alley at midnight, even though it's a shortcut home. That's the thing here. I live in Arizona, and while I live up in the mountains, up north, down south, you're walking out in nature, and there's a rattlesnake in the trail. The rattlesnake's not your friend. Move away from the rattlesnake. Keep yourself safe. Be afraid of the rattlesnake. Don't step too close to the edge of the Grand Canyon. Be afraid of that. And so the anxiety and the fear is there to warn us that there is danger. Sort of like the fire alarm in a building. Someone pulls a fire alarm, the lights and the sirens go off, warning everybody that there's danger, get to safety. We also have a warning system, but instead of lights and sirens, it's feeling states. The feeling state of fear, the feeling state of anxiety, the feeling state of overwhelming worry are warning signals that there's danger. The big problem comes in that our mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And so this is most noticeable. I mean, you probably, at some point in your life, Cody, and probably a lot of your listeners have experienced having a nightmare, or maybe maybe kids have had a nightmare or something like this. And it doesn't matter how stupid, how ridiculous, how crazy the dream is. A gigantic cheeseburger and his two hot dog friends are chasing you down the street, throwing coconuts at you. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. It will not happen. And yet your mind can't tell whether that's a real threat or an imagined threat. And even in deep sleep, it will clock that danger, and it has this sort of shoot first, ask questions later protocol. It'll turn on that stress response. Again, that's a pretty extraordinary change within mind, body, and brain to create the stress response. Now you're doing that while asleep, all because of cheeseburgers chasing down the street, throwing coconuts at you. Imagine what's happening in your waking world. And so if we know that through thoughts, no matter how ridiculous, how silly, and how unbelievable, if we know what we think can change how we feel in your body, well, let's do that on purpose. Again, we're not doing anything we're not doing already. We're just doing it on purpose and for the intention of your healing.
Right. And so, I understand that. And I think the issue a lot of people might have with that is, like we're saying, this conscious change of thought. Okay. So earlier we were talking about something. You said you were basically stuck in fight or flight, as a response to something that maybe you didn't even know happened, or maybe that you weren't aware of, or whatever.
Yeah.
My understanding, and this is it's crazy that we're talking about this right now, because I'm having a conversation with somebody tomorrow on the podcast about PTSD.
Okay.
And it sounds like to me, my understanding, my very limited understanding, is that PTSD is being stuck in that fight or flight, long after the event or the trauma or whatever has left.
Yeah.
And so, and maybe it's not even as extreme as PTSD. Maybe just people who have general anxiety or, depression of varying levels, maybe they also feel this. But it's like people who are in these states, whether it's PTSD, anxiety, depression, you can't just consciously or with a lot of ease just change your thought patterns when this is something that's been sort of replayed in your mind, I feel like.
Right.
So and I think you said that. I think you said the core issue, whatever that is, has to be addressed.
Yes.
So addressing that core issue, because it sounds like it's not just changing your thought patterns or your whatever your thoughts might be, but changing that core issue. Is that something that can be done through hypnotherapy? Whatever that core issue, whatever that causes the depression or whatever.
Let me give you an example. Back in 2020 and 2021, I guess 2022, I was doing classes for the cancer support community of Arizona.
Okay.
And these were, I was doing them live because they opened up an office up here in I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. They opened up an office up here in Flagstaff. So I was doing in-person classes on a Saturday morning or Thursday evening or whatever, pain control and healing acceleration. And all this is proven scientifically. And just as an aside, I'll send you some links and things you can put out there. But if you want to research the scientific validity of hypnotherapy and hypnosis, Google has a kind of subsection called Google Scholar. And all it does is search scientific and medical research as published in peer-reviewed journals. And so if you go to regular Google, google.com, and you type in Google Scholar, your first search result will be scholar.google.com. Type in hypnotherapy and PTSD, type in hypnotherapy and pain control, whatever you want, hypnosis and anxiety relief. And you'll get hundreds, if not thousands, of results on peer-reviewed articles as published in medical journals and scientific journals showing the efficacy of this work. But a few years ago, I was doing classes, and we switched to Zoom, of course, because of COVID, and cancer patients, of course, have compromised immune systems. So they were the first ones I noticed that shut everything down and went to Zoom. And now I say 80 to 85% of all my sessions one-on-one are over Zoom, just because it's so convenient and people feel relaxed and comfortable in their homes, and it works really well. And so I was doing these classes, and we do a series. And in one series, this older woman was in the class. And, we have like 12, 15 people in a class over Zoom. And I'm guessing she's about 70 years old. And she came to the first two classes. And there's not a lot of group work. It's just me explaining hypnotherapy, and let's do a process. Everybody close your eyes and let's move through this visualization technique or whatever the strategy is we're using that day. And then at the end, if you want to ask questions, fine. But mostly people have things to do and they go. So there's not a lot of interaction. But the third class I'm early, setting up the Zoom room, and she came early, and we're just chit-chatting about life and the weather. And then all of a sudden she asked me if hypnotherapy works with procrastination. And I said, yeah, it works well with procrastination, because procrastination is a mindset issue. Even though this thing will be beneficial to you, getting the homework done, getting the report finished, doing the presentation, you're backing away from it, making yourself smaller, because for some reason you're finding it dangerous. Again, you've hypnotized yourself to not only move away from something dangerous, but something that could potentially be beneficial to you by getting the promotion or getting the raise or graduating and moving on to something else. And so, yeah, that's a mindset issue. Hypnotherapy can work with that because it's something stuck and installed within the subconscious mind. And so we actually set up a session for the very next day, because I had an afternoon availability appointment open. And what's interesting about this work, when your subconscious mind starts thinking about, oh, we're going to do a healing session, the gears start turning. And the subconscious mind kind of goes, well, we could work on a problem, but why not work on the problem? And when she got to the session 24 hours later, solo session over Zoom, one-on-one, she says, I told you I wanted to work on procrastination, but what I really want to work on is why I don't matter in life. This is a 70-year-old woman who thinks she's worthless and doesn't matter. Of course, that's a mindset issue, and that's probably very painful and really hurts. And there's a feeling state to that, just like there's a feeling state to anxiety, or there's a feeling state to anger. And somewhere in your body, you can point to and say, I feel anger right here. I feel anxiety right here in my gut or in the back of my head. There's a feeling state to not being worthy or feeling worthless or not mattering. And so we're doing this healing work, and we get to a point where I think it's best to regress and find the origin of this unworthiness that she feels. And so we do this regression process, and I count 10 down to 1. And on 1, you're going to be at that very first time you ever felt this, the very first time you ever felt that you didn't matter in life. 10 down to 1, and 1, where are you? And she says, I'm standing up in my crib, and my father's screaming at me because I won't stop crying. Now, if she's 70 years old, that's probably the late 1950s, early 1960s, something like this. And maybe men back then weren't exactly taught how to be nurturing fathers to young children. Or maybe dad's just not the greatest dad in the world, not a very nice person. Or maybe just dad's having a bad day, a bad week, a bad life. And mom's out of the house and the baby won't stop crying. He doesn't know what to do. And out of frustration and just having had enough, the only thing he knows how to do is to scream louder than the baby and tell the baby to shut up. And in that instant, that child that's a year old, maybe 14 months old, the child, as all of us, whatever age we are at, has to justify what is happening to us. Why is this happening to us? And in that instant, that child decided, well, the only thing that makes sense is that I don't matter in life. I obviously don't matter, because here's this person who's supposed to nurture me, who's supposed to love me, protect me, is screaming at me, just telling me to shut up. So I must be worthless. Another option could have been, whoa, dad's having a bad day. Maybe I'll be quiet and we'll have fun tomorrow. But in that instant, that child, what the child came up with is that I must be unworthy of love, of attention, of being creative. I must not matter in life. And she carried that with her for some 70 years until one day she decided to change it. And she did. And I never saw her again, And we kept in touch. I follow up with people, check in, making sure they're doing okay. But she did two or three group sessions on topics that have nothing to do with what she wanted to heal, pain control, healing, acceleration, just generalized topics in a group setting. Did one solo session, went all the way back to standing up in the crib, which again, I don't know, I'm guessing that's 12 months old, 14 months old, healed it, and now is living an amazing life. We kept in touch for about a year, going back and forth with email, just checking in every month or so, seeing how she's doing. She's doing fantastic. Change happens in an instant. There may be some lead up, as I said, some setup, maybe 70 years of setup, but there came a point in her life where she says, I can't do this anymore. I want it to change. And so she changed it. It didn't take years of talk therapy, of going over. I mean, how long would it have taken her in talk therapy to go back to standing up in the crib? Who ever remembers something like that? And so that's, again, why I started off with, sometimes people spin their wheels in talk therapy, and not to put talk therapy on blast, because I think it's very important. I think everybody should have a coach. Certainly every champion has a coach. Every master musician, any 10th degree black belt in Taekwondo has a coach, has a master that they're following. And so it's always good to have that second pair of eyes, especially around relationships, especially around business, especially around your health. But if you don't know what the core issue is, what are you talking about? What are you trying to heal? You're trying to heal these external issues, these subset issues, these side effect issues, and which is fine. Those need to be taken care of. But often what I find is you heal that core issue, everything else falls away. Everything else dissipates because they're all connected to that root issue. That foundational issue. You take away the foundation, the building must crumble. And so that's why a lot of people find that just doing this work in just a handful of sessions, they will literally rewire their brains and reset their nervous system. Now, having said that, there's kind of two parts to this. Yes, there's that deeper healing work like I just talked about. But we also know that what you practice, you get better at. What is strongest within your mind is what you do over and over again. So there's not just the deeper healing work we do in a session, but what do you want more of? You want more joy? You want more happiness? You want more peace of mind and body? You want more confidence? You can have all that, but there's practice to it. Michael Phelps, after winning his 28th gold medal, he was in the pool the next day practicing. Yo-Yo Ma, considered one of the greatest cello players of all time, 67, 68 years old, he still practices every day. Any 10th degree black belt in judo or taekwondo is going to practice every day. The Dalai Lama, 90 years old, still meditates every day. If anybody was to have it down by now, you think it'd be that guy. But he talks about the anger and the sorrow and despair in his talks and his teachings and in his books. He writes about, Chinese government is still arresting his monks and torturing his monks in Tibet. They're still bulldozing down his monasteries to build roads and buildings, and probably mainly just to give him the middle finger. And as a human being, that's got to create a lot of grief, a lot of sorrow, a lot of despair, a lot of anger. He was exiled out of Tibet in 1957 or 1956 or something like that. But he doesn't want the anger to be who he is. He's going to feel it because he's a human being. And we feel the full spectrum of emotions. But he doesn't want that to be who he is. He doesn't want the anger to infest him. And so every day he practices loving kindness and compassion meditation. That's his work. To this day at night. And he doesn't have a lot of the challenges that a lot of us have. He's not married. He doesn't have kids. He doesn't have a 9-to-5 job. He doesn't have a commute down the freeway. It takes him 45 minutes. He has a staff of people to meet his every need and want. And granted, he has great responsibility, but he doesn't have a lot of these life challenges that you and I, Cody, and the rest of our, the listeners here today have. And yet he's still there doing the work. So there's two parts to this. There's the deeper healing work, getting the dirt out of the water, if you will. And then what is your intention? What does you want? You want more happiness? You want more physical health, mental health, emotional health? You want joy? You want compassion? You want confidence? You can have it, but there's practice involved with that to rewire your brain, rewire your system. And just as, many of your listeners probably remember Jack LaLanne. You might be too young for him, but back in the 60s and 70s, Jack LaLanne was the Richard Simmons of his time. And he'd be on all the talk shows, Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas and Dinah Shore and all that, Johnny Carson, talking about health. He had his own line of gyms, the Jack LaLanne gyms. He was a guy, if you ever heard of this guy, who would, on his birthday, swim across the lake towing pulling rowboats with people in them across the lake. He was doing that into his 80s to celebrate his birthday and to promote health. He was working out the day before he died at the age of 96. And so we know with our physical health, you just don't get to go to a personal trainer once and work out twice at the gym and then you're good for the rest of your life. And you get to look like Hugh Jackman as a Wolverine for the rest of your life. You have to work at that every day. You have to do something for your physical health every day. You have to watch your food. You have to watch what you're drinking. You have to certainly exercise for doing something. So what about your mental health? What about your emotional health? What are you doing for that? It's just say you go to a talk therapist for a couple of months and then you're good for the rest of your life. There are always going to be challenges in relationships and at work with your career, with starting a new business. There's always going to be challenges. So what are you doing every day? Not only to promote your physical health, but your mental and emotional health. And even if it's just 5 minutes to do some sort of affirmations or visualization exercises, or seeing the future you with all the joy and happiness and abundance and prosperity, whatever it is, even if it's just 5 minutes, you got to do something, because what you practice, you get better at. What is strongest within your mind is what you do over and over again. That's the basis of therapeutic hypnosis.
So this is really interesting, man, because I this makes me think that do you work with people with addictions?
Yeah, addiction works well. It depends on specifically what the situation is. If we're talking cigarettes, in fact, that's probably one of the most famous things hypnotherapy works with. Was most favorite for. But yeah, this works helps with alcoholism, works with heroin addiction, things like this. Now, I want to be very clear about this. This isn't the be all end all. This is a tool in your toolbox. And we all need all sorts of coaching and help. Look, to win the World Series, you don't have one coach. You have a hitting coach, you have a running coach, you have a throwing coach, you have a nutritionalist, you have a physical therapist. It takes a lot of help to be a winner, to be a champion. And so this isn't alternative therapy as in only do this and don't do that other stuff. This is adjunct. This is as well as. So on top of let's just, if this works for you, the 12-step program, on top of going to counseling, on top of, whatever you need to do to detox, hypnotherapy can definitely be a part of that to help with the healing and the reset, sort of the, when you install a new operating system, it can certainly help with all that. I wouldn't, especially something as extraordinary as something like heroin addiction or meth or alcohol. I wouldn't I'm just going to go to one hypnotherapy session and that will be it. There's a lot more going on there that needs attention, but it could certainly be part of the team.
Yeah. So the reason I'm asking it is, first of all, I think addiction is a huge issue, but I mean, there's a lot of issues that I think, a person could probably benefit for something like this. But addiction, at least from the outside looking in, to hearing people talk about it, it's like there's a lot of self-sabotage going on there as far as, I can't get better because X, or I can't get better because Y, or whatever it is. And, we talked about the procrastination and we talked about all these things. It's like I can't help but keep bringing it back to the self, to the person, because it's like the person is trying to make themselves believe that this bad thing or this bad situation, this bad state of mind is justified some sort of way. Like the procrastination thing, I procrastinate. I don't do things at a timely manner. Well, it turns out because the person didn't feel that she was worthy. So maybe she didn't feel that she was worthy to do things in a respectable timeline. And so it just seems like it's fascinating that it always comes down to the person. You'll find, I'm sure you see this in your line of work. You'll see a person who has some sort of addiction that really hinders their lifestyle. So like alcohol, for example, most people can't just operate, extremely drunk and just operate in society, but you'll find a person who's doing well. They're staying sober for a while. They'll get a job, and then some kind of way they'll sabotage that job to reinforce the belief, whatever that happens to be. And then they're back, on the alcohol again. And so it's just, it seems like a lot of these different avenues lead back to what we talked about earlier, the intention of the self. What is it that you already believe about yourself? And that's just the point that I want to drive home here, because it's, myself included, I think we all have this idea of hypnotherapy as someone making us believe something about ourselves that we don't already believe, or that, whatever. But it sounds like what it is it's helping us uncover what we actually believe. And maybe that's not a good thing. I mean, maybe it's not a good thing, but maybe we can change that through the therapeutic process.
Yeah.
And
if let's say, for example, well, here's an interesting example that just happened to me recently. I was working with somebody, and it's for a lot of kind of like anxiety and just trying to get through work and things like this. And we worked about, like, he'd come in like once a month, like maybe every 6 weeks. I think we did like 2 or 3 sessions pretty close together within a few weeks. And then he came back like 6 weeks later, and then he came back another month later. And so we'd done about 6 or 7 sessions together. And on like the 7th session, he came in, oh, I wanted to tell you I'm 30 days sober. Like, I had no idea he was drinking. He didn't tell me. He didn't put it in the intake form. We'd never discussed it. It had nothing to do with the work we were doing. I mean, obviously it had something to do with the work we were doing. But he said, because of the work, because of this hypnotherapy and the healing I've done, I don't drink anymore. And we weren't specifically, like you say, he didn't come to me and says, I'm an alcoholic and I want to quit drinking. He says, I want to work on this hurt and pain I have in my life and how it's affecting my work relationships and my, friendships and my family issues. And I was like, okay, let's work on that. And we do various things whenever he'd come in. And then one day he just came in and said, oh yeah, I quit smoking, or I quit smoking. I quit drinking. And so it can be very helpful because, if you grew up in a household where you're physically abused and had somebody telling you you're worthless, I mean, that's going to be very influential in your life. And so it's not so much that you need to quit the drinking, you do, but that's not the problem. That's the effect of the hurt and pain.
Right. So
if you deal with the hurt and pain, then there's no reason to drink anymore. Now there's probably other aspects to the addictive personality and all that need to be worked on. And that's why sometimes this isn't just a one and done, or just a couple of sessions. Sometimes you need to work on it and install these newer beliefs about yourself. But you heal the child, if that's where this started, then everything else after it has to collapse. If you give the child the worthiness and the protection and the safety and the love and the confidence and the strength and power to move through all those situations, and the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined, would you not then heal every other aspect moving forward if you change that foundational issue? And if you change the foundational issue, if you become a different person and how you believe about yourself, then why would you need to drink? That was that old person who doesn't exist anymore. You've literally, updated your operating system. And so if you've updated the operating system, it's like updating an app on your phone. So it's kind of the same app. It's just newer and better and does more stuff and is better and all that, hopefully. And so it's the same with this. You're still the same you, but now you're just updated the operating system to be stronger and more empowered and heal all the bugs that were in there. Heal all the bugs. Now the operating system works really, really well. And if you don't, need to drink anymore, you don't need to drink anymore. As long as you are in a situation where that doesn't influence the drinking. That's a big problem with heroin addiction, is that people get put right back in the same situation that was causing them to use heroin in the first place. If you live in squalor in the bad part of town, in a building that's about to be demolished for safety reasons, and your family comes, oh, we got to get you into rehab. You're like, yeah, I'm ready for rehab. And they go to a beautiful place in the Bahamas or Maui or somewhere, and they were around loving people and nurturing people and great food and a beautiful place. And after 30 days, they're like, this is great. I'm not on heroin anymore. I love life and I love myself. And you put them back in that same building, because where else are they going to go? They're going to start, using heroin. There was a extraordinary situation during the Vietnam War in the early 70s when the Pentagon and the Nixon administration realized that they had a big heroin problem on their hands because the kids over there in this horrifying situation of the Vietnam War were using all sorts of methods to numb themselves, whether it was alcohol, really good pot over there, but also really good heroin, stuff you could snort. And they thought, as they knew the war was winding up, they thought they were going to dump something like 50,000 heroin addicts on the streets of America. And so they actually developed commissions and special committees and reports on how they were going to deal with this situation of all these heroin addicts. And what they found, though, is that when they pulled the kids out of Vietnam, usually sometimes they'd end up in Germany and then Germany to back in America, but they would take off the uniform. They'd start growing their hair before they even, got back to America because they were out of the military. Start growing their hair, start growing beards, put on civilian clothes, get on a commercial airliner to fly home. They were no longer in a situation where they needed to numb themselves and find relief from the horrors that they were experiencing. And when they arrived back home to Cincinnati or Cleveland or Houston or Athens, Georgia, or whatever, San Diego, when they arrived back in, they didn't need heroin anymore. They literally went cold turkey and cured themselves because they were no longer in the hell that required them to numb themselves out. And of course, there's also the situation of where in America are you going to find pure heroin like that? You're going to have to, cook it up and inject it. And who likes injecting? And where are you going to find that anyway in 1974 Cincinnati? And so their whole world changed by moving back to a place where they felt safe and comfortable. Therefore, they didn't need heroin anymore. And the problem pretty much solved itself. They healed themselves by removing themselves from that literal physical hell, that world of horror. And so when dealing with addiction in terms of, and I'm not an addiction specialist, that's not my field of study. I can certainly help with that in terms of a team of people or somebody's healing around that stuff. But in terms of dealing with addictions, is it not more dealing with the hurt and pain that's having the person numb themselves out? If you deal with the anxiety and the stress and the wounding and the trauma and the PTSD, well, then what do you need to numb yourself from? Assuming that, you're still not living in the abusive household and you're still, doing all that, coming to a hypnotherapy appointment, then going back to an abusive house, probably is not going to help very much. So again, you need to not only update that operating system, but find yourself in a safe place, so you don't need to self-soothe yourself with things like alcohol or heroin or meth or whatever.
That's a good point. I was actually going to ask you that. I think a war zone is probably obvious. Abusive house is obvious. How important do you think your environment is to the human mind when we talk about these things? I mean, because, I think it's, like I said, getting out of a war zone, I think that's pretty obvious when getting out of an abusive house. But I mean, because it's not necessarily the case, especially if it is a house that, maybe is, I don't know, got clutter all around or whatever. That's not necessarily an immediate fix, but it's also something that's not out of the realm of possibilities to be fixed. Just clean the house up or whatever it is. Yeah. So how important do you think environment is to the mind like that?
Well, I think it's extraordinary for me. You can see that, the difference between a huge city like New York, Tokyo, Chicago, San Francisco, as opposed to a more natural setting like, maybe Humboldt County in California amongst the redwoods, or somewhere beautiful in Oregon or northern Idaho, or somewhere, or in Montana or something. Moab, Utah, as well as so like Montana or Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. There's a different feeling. There's just buildings, there are restaurants, there's coffee shops, but Jackson Hole, Wyoming feels very different than New York City, Manhattan. And so there's a different, environment there is going to, I would think you would want, having been to New York a couple of times, it's like, or in San Francisco a lot, because I used to live in Santa Cruz. It's like I put up my armor when I go to those big cities, whereas I living in a beautiful place like Flagstaff, Arizona, in the beautiful mountains amongst the beautiful trees and beautiful forest. It's very, very different. Still houses, and I go to a building to go to work, to my office, and I go to restaurants, and I drive down the street in my car. But it's a different environment, so I feel differently here, And that's not to say anything wrong with Chicago or New York or living in a big city. But there was that, a lot of maybe your older listeners of a certain age will remember that it's kind of a weird song / speech of somebody supposedly giving a graduation speech. It was something about, I was thinking in the late 1990s, and the gist of it was always wear sunscreen or something like that. But one of the lines in it, and this may jog everybody's memory who heard it before, is one of the lines was, live in New York until it makes you hard, and live in Northern California until it makes you too soft. And it's that thing. It's like, yeah, those are beautiful places to live, but it's also that environment's going to influence you. I mean, we're very influential people. Look, wine poured from a heavier bottle tastes better. The color of a medication and the shape of it influences how it works within your body. The best colors to use for medication are pink and green, although the best color for a tranquilizer is blue, light blue, except for Italian men. Light blue, like the color of my shirt, light blue tranquilizers don't work with Italian men, and they think because one of the football teams is the azure, and azure is Italian for blue. And so it's exciting for them. The uniforms are blue, the banners are blue, the flags are blue. And so to them, blue is very exciting because it reminds them of the football team. But everyone else in the entire world, blue is the best color for tranquilizers. If you're dealing with insomnia or something like that, just not Italian men. There was a research study that showed, that was pretty extraordinary. These actors, I think they're like Central Park or some big park where people just hang out and sit on benches and read newspapers and things like this. It's a big park, and these actors would go up to people, and they would have like a coffee cup in their hand. They sit on the bench and say, "Hey, excuse me, would you hold my coffee for a minute? I need to text my mom." And then they get out their phone and they text, and they grab the coffee bag. "Thank you so much," and they'd walk off. That was it. That was the whole exchange. Half the people held iced coffee. The other half of people held hot coffee. A half an hour later, they would be approached by a researcher with a clipboard. And the researcher would say, "Hey, I just wanted to see if you'd be willing to read these 3 paragraphs and answer 2 questions. You can have this $20. It'll take you 2 minutes." About 98% of the people would do it. They'd read these 3 paragraphs. The questions had to deal with the main character and the attributes and the character traits of the main character of the story. The people who held the iced coffee, 81% of them said that the main character was cold and aloof. 80% of the people who held a hot coffee said the person was warm and endearing and engaging. It's the same story. You think that your perceptions are your own, but you're being influenced. I mean, this goes, if you're doing a presentation, if you have investors who you want to invest in your new business, serve them hot drinks before your pitch. They'll find you warm and engaging. Serve them hot coffee or tea or a hot cider. You don't have to drink it. They just have to hold the hot cup.
Yeah.
They will find you warm and engaging and more likely to. And if you see them walking in with iced coffee, I don't know how you're going to change that. So we think we're being influenced. We influence ourselves. Oh, TV won't influence me, and podcasts won't influence me, and movies won't influence me, and newspapers and what I read on the internet won't influence me. You're being influenced heavily. We know watching TV. I'm the one who did all this, but it's known that watching TV puts you in that alpha brainwave state. They knew that back in 1969, and that research wasn't published in a medical or scientific journal. That was published in the Journal of Advertising and Marketing. We know watching TV puts you in the alpha brainwave state. The news knows that. Commercials know that. Politicians know that. And so
Some people,
what are you being sold?
some people say that's why it's called a TV program.
Yeah.
Because it does put you in that. And that is very, listen, tinfoil hat aside, that's something to be very aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when I mean, I think probably children, especially, but even adults, be conscious of what it is that you're watching or absorbing, through podcasts or whatever, because these things have an effect. I don't know if there's any science or research on this, but we when I was a teenager, we heard a lot about the subliminal messages. If you play a song backwards, it's like a whole different. It actually sounds like a completely different message.
Yeah.
There's a Led Zeppelin song that's famous for that. But I want to ask you, because I'm gonna have to close up here in a little bit. I want to ask you just real quick before we finish. So we talk about hypnosis. We talk about, basically it sounds like we're trying to influence ourselves or become aware of our own thoughts or whatever. I want to ask what I feel like is a very important question. And I know there's different ways to build and maintain our self-confidence, but I think as, if a person that is doing anything in the world, that's going to be productive to anything, we're going to encounter stress. We're going to encounter people who maybe don't necessarily agree with us or who are a little bit hostile about how they disagree with us. We're giving these presentations, we're trying to raise families, we're doing all these things, and there's stress everywhere. What would you say as far as a self-confidence goes? How can we kind of be sort of grounded? And I know there's a lot of different ways to build self-confidence, do difficult things and that kind of thing. But as far as the hypnosis part of it, just, I guess, maybe hypnotizing yourself to believe in yourself. Is that something you sort of usually work with?
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. Here's the best thing you can do in terms of, and when you say, hypnotize, I can't hypnotize myself. All hypnosis is hypnotizing yourself. I can't hypnotize anybody. You have to want to be hypnotized, if that makes sense. Again, I can't control people. The whole thing with I don't have anything that looks like a watch, but the whole thing is just like, is to bore you, just like back in high school math class, sleep, and that monotone voice. Remember Ferris Bueller's Day Off? That teacher put everybody in the hypnagogic trance state. They're drooling on their desk. They're staring out the window. That's what that's all about. The boring voice, the getting sleepy, follow my watch. You're doing that. So you put you in that alpha theta brainwave state. But you're doing that because you want to. You went to the appointment. You made the appointment, and so you're going to want to heal. So you allow yourself to do that. So in terms of your own work, the best, look, the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined, and what you practice, you get better at. So pretend you're not confident. Pretend you're confident. You are confident in a great many things. Tying your shoes, maybe riding a bicycle if you know how to do that, or driving a car, zipping up your jacket. I know these are kind of small things, but knowing that you could walk to where your shoes are, put them on, tie the bow, and walk out without your shoes flying off. You're confident that you can do that. What does that feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? Well, I feel confidence right here in my chest, or I feel it in my gut, or the back of my head, or my throat, or whatever. Okay, yeah, what's the color of confidence? It's green, it's red, it's dark blue. So fine, make it bigger, make it more colorful, expand and make it bigger. And now see yourself giving the speech, giving the presentation, doing the thing that you want more confidence of. And this will literally rewire your brain. And really quickly, because I know you got to go, but there was some research done in the 1990s. And at that point, there's so much new technology, researchers could watch a living brain work in real time. Before, all we had were sociological experiments and autopsies on, obviously, dead brains. And so as we're getting I was there, like the SPECT scans and the MRIs, as all this equipment is being developed, we can, again, there's a way they can watch the brain work in real time. So researchers wanted to watch the brain learn something. So they picked piano, and they had people come in who didn't know how to play, showed them simple little scales and exercises and little songs you learn as a beginner. And they would sit down at the piano for 2 hours a day for 7 days and just practice piano. They had the control group. You always have to have the control group. And they didn't do anything. Didn't learn anything, didn't practice piano, didn't even come into the lab. And they just did nothing for 7 days, didn't learn anything new. They had a third group who just randomly played the piano without learning anything. Just played the piano, went up and down the scales or up and down the keyboard. But what's extraordinary is they had a fourth group who only pretended to play piano. They brought them in, showed them the scales, the exercises, the little songs you learn as a beginner. But instead of sitting at the piano, they sat over at a recliner on the couch, closed their eyes, and pretended with their imagination to practice the piano. At the end of 7 days, the group who practiced piano, they worked the keys with their fingers. They heard the music with their ears. They read the sheet music with their eyeballs. They developed a new neural network in the part of the brain associated with music and also learning. Of course they did. They're learning music. That's not a big deal. That's no big mystery. The control group, who didn't do anything, didn't learn anything, didn't practice anything new, nothing changed in their brains. Compare or contrast. Well, they didn't do anything, nothing changed in their brains. Okay, no big mystery there. The group who only randomly just plucked at the piano, nothing changed in their brains because they didn't learn anything. They weren't doing anything new. They're just randomly just playing nothing on the piano. But what's extraordinary is the group who pretended to practice, pretended to learn something new, even though they never touched the piano. They developed the same neural network in the same part of the brain as those people who were really playing the piano. Their brains look like they're practicing the piano, even though they never heard any music, they never read any music, they never worked the keys with their fingers. You can literally pretend that you're doing something and rewire your brain. Many people of a certain age may remember back in the 1970s, the Olympics. The Soviet Union was very dominant in gymnastics, Nadia Comaneci and all of them. And nobody could figure out why they were winning the gold, the silver, and the bronze. Nobody could figure out why they were winning the world championships, everything. They were so far ahead of everybody else, no one could figure out what they were doing until some of the athletes and some of the coaches started defecting in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And what the world discovered was that the gymnastics team of the Soviet Union was spending 50% of the time, at least 50% of the time, in mental rehearsal. Meaning, yes, they would practice. If they're doing the mats, they would practice the jumps and the flips and the tumbles and all that stuff. If they're doing the uneven bars, they'd practice on that. But then they'd sit on a couch, sit in a recliner, close their eyes, and run that routine over and over and over again. And now we know why that actually worked for them, because they are literally wiring success into their brains. You can find books written about this back in the 80s. They were literally wiring, and I guarantee you, every single athlete, every single Olympic athlete, every single professional athlete is doing mental rehearsal every day, because we know it wires it into your brain. And what becomes very alarming is, what if you're rehearsing failure? What if you're thinking about, I got to give that speech in a couple of months? What if you're seeing just, oh my God, I'm going to stumble over my words and my PowerPoint's going to be upside down and I'm going to forget what I'm going to say, and people are going to start to chuckle and laugh and roll their eyes. They're going to throw rotten tomatoes at me and chase me off the stage with pitchforks and fire. If you're practicing failure, are you literally not wiring that failure into your head and wiring it into your nervous system? So what are the chances that it's not going to go very well? So in terms of a long answer to a short question, what can you do for your confidence? Practice being confident. Practice being successful.
Well, and I guess it sounds like this could go whatever a person feels like their thing is, needs to be worked on, whether it's self-confidence or self-worth or, whatever it is for themselves. Just kind of wire your brain to think that you already are that thing, whatever that might be. Yeah. Now, I want to say this because people who listen to the podcast and people who know me personally or just listen to some of the things I say know that I wouldn't necessarily support or advocate or whatever it is Stoic philosophies, which one of those philosophies are, if you're going to do a thing, envision the possibility that you might fail so that you can teach yourself how to react to it. But the difference with that is, I think from what you're saying is, you're talking about, when you say, visualize these things, positive or negative, you're talking about the physiological attachment to it. So how do you feel when you're confident? How do you feel when you win? How do you feel when you give this presentation and everybody loves it and it's great? I don't think the Stoic philosophy says it. It just says, imagine what if, you're giving a presentation, the power goes off. Okay, what are you going to do so that you're planning? Exactly. Yeah. It's not that you're expecting this, but it's what if this case were to happen, how would you proceed with it?
Yeah, you need a contingency plan. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you, a lot of times we show up with a flash drive and it's not going to work because we're using whatever the Apple version was, a keyword or whatever, and they're using PowerPoint. It's not going to work. What do you do? Well, okay, now you have to, improvise.
Right.
But in terms of practicing, in terms of having a bullet point plan, It's just like a flight simulator. A pilot's going to get, let's say they have to fly into London next week and they've never been to Heathrow Airport. They're going to get in a flight simulator and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that they hope that there's turbulence or hope that it's, a big rainstorm or whatever. They're just practicing in case that happens. They'll know what to do.
Right.
Because they want a successful flight. And that's kind of what's happening when you ruminate as you're trying to fall asleep at night. If anybody's ever done that before, it's, one, we're tired, we have decision fatigue, and all of a sudden your brain goes, oh my God, that presentation I got to give next week, and it's going to go poorly. I'm going to forget what I'm going to say. Or you start remembering that thing that happened a couple of years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, it's causing the PTSD. It's your mind kind of doing a flight simulator. It doesn't want to experience it again. It's not trying to harm you by reliving it over and over again. It's trying to run scenarios so that you are safe the next time that may happen. It wants to protect you. And so like a flight simulator, practicing on a flight simulator is practicing whether that thing happened 50 years ago or it hasn't even happened yet, and it's something you may be fearing in the future. It's running scenarios to practice what happens if everything goes wrong. You got to stop that though, because that's hyping you up, and your mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So it thinks it's happening right now. So if you're reliving the car accident that happened 50 years ago, it's not that it happened 50 years ago, it's happening right now again. And it's hyping up your body and implanting and storing that hurt and pain even stronger and more empowered within your nervous system, your subconscious mind. You're thinking about that presentation you got to give next month in front of the big conference, the keynote speech, and it's going wrong. It thinks even though you're lying in bed, lights are off, head's on the pillow, you couldn't be more comfortable and cozy, it thinks you're in front of an audience booing you. And so what's that going to do to your nervous system? And how is that going to wire you for that experience so that when you actually get up there, you're waiting for everybody to start booing you, and you're going to maybe find a way for them to boo you. So always be prepared. Sure. Have a spare tire in your car. Have a first aid kit when you go out hiking. Have a flashlight and make sure your phone's charged when you go out hiking. You don't want to be in a situation where you're lost for 3 days, but just in case, make sure you have a flashlight, make sure you have a phone, make sure people know where you're going, make sure you have a first aid kit. If you're, but go in with the intention that you're going to have a great time and it's going to be the most successful thing, and even visualize that success. I mean, maybe not with your hike, but if you're like doing a presentation or you're about to present in front of new investors for your business, or you're hiring somebody or whatever, go in visualizing the success, and like we know from the Soviet Union athletes, what we know from that piano players research study, it will literally wire success into your brain. It's not hard. All you have to do is just pretend. How easy is that? This isn't hard work. Yeah. You just got to do it. In of itself, getting on a treadmill and lifting some weights is not hard work. You just got to do it. Otherwise you're not going to see the results.
I have one more thing I want to ask you before I do that. Where can people find you? Do you have website, social medias,
sure.
anything?
Yeah, I do the social medias. Maybe I'm not on there as much as I probably should, but the best way to find me is probably my website, Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. I know that's a mouthful, but I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I work with people around the country, around the world, because of the amazing thing of Zoom or things like Riverside and things like this. And it works really well. So if you just went to Google and searched for Flagstaff Hypnosis, you'll see me show up. Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. I also have, which might be easier to remember, a test anxiety course. It's not just for high schoolers or people in university, but a lot of professionals. Whether you're a nurse, a firefighter, an electrician, an auto mechanic, a real estate agent, you have to take licensing exams. And it's called ACE Any Test. That's pretty easy to remember. So you can email me there, or Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy.
Okay. And if you send me some links to that, I'll attach them once we get the actual video uploaded, everything, I'll attach everything and it'll be all in there.
Perfect.
So a question I normally ask everybody before we close this thing out, I know it's hard to pinpoint the most important, But if you could share maybe one of the most important lessons you've learned in your life, if it could be your personal life, if it's something you're comfortable sharing, your career, what do you think is one of the most important lessons you've ever learned?
I think the most important thing I ever learned, and I've already said it a couple of times here, is what you practice, you get better at. And when that got thrown in my face like a 2x4 to the head, it was pretty astonishing when you realize what you practice, you get better at. We know that we're from playing piano, from playing guitar, or learning martial arts or dance, or learning a foreign language, learning to walk as a kid. What you practice, you get better at. But what if you're practicing anxiety? What if you're practicing anger? What if you're practicing failure? What if you're practicing just depression and sadness? What you practice, you get better at. And you will literally, like we know from the piano players, it'll literally wire it into your head. You can literally wire anxiety, wire depression, wire anger, wire failure into your brain. So once you understand that scientific fact, you can start to change it. But you have to be aware enough to okay, I need to start practicing feeling good within my mind and body. If there's some dirt in your water, as we kind of the metaphor was a little bit ago, yeah, you need to clean it out. You need to remove the hurt and the pain, the wounding, the trauma, the PTSD, whatever it may be. But you can build yourself up. You can be the person you want to be. You can have the happiness, the joy, and the confidence, the success, the abundance in all areas of life. You can have it. It's just you may have to heal something that is blocking that. And once you remove that, doesn't automatically mean, once you pull out the anger and the anxiety, doesn't mean all of a sudden you're filled with joy and happiness. Maybe you are, but it's a good chance you're not, because you've never practiced that before.
Yep.
So practice.
And what I love about this, and I know you touched on this earlier, we say that, well, if we tell somebody, well, it's your fault that you're not, this problem exists for you, or that you're not where you want to be. I mean, that sounds harsh, but at the same time, it sends the message that, yes, it might be your fault, or maybe it's not even your fault. Maybe you're in a spot, maybe you were born to a specific situation. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to fix that.
There you go.
But what I love about this, though, whether it's maybe it is your fault, or maybe it's not your fault, but it's still technically your responsibility, it still puts the power of the change in your hands.
Yeah.
And
it
it's
becomes
not like it's
very empowering.
Yeah. And it's not like it's, to an external force, to society or culture or this person or this group of people or whatever. It's the power is in your hands to make the change that you want to make. And I know, to a certain extent, I mean, yes, we need to do things collectively, and things need to happen on a collective level. But I feel like if the collective level is everybody doing their part, so even then I still feel like the power is in the hands of the individual person.
Yeah. 100%. I agree with 100%. Yes, it's not your fault. It shouldn't have happened. It wasn't fair.
Yep.
But you were the one, even as a child, you were the one who put the instructions, installed those instructions on how to keep yourself safe. Again, through a traumatic experience, and probably unconsciously, and through duress and through a lot of pain, just like that example I have of the older woman who at 1 year old or whatever it was, installed that, I guess I'm worthless. She did that. And it's not to blame her or say it was her fault, or that it was fair that was happened, or that she had a awful father or anything. That wasn't her fault.
Right.
But like you said, it's her responsibility to change that, because she's the one who installed it. And that becomes very empowering, because you don't have to look outside of yourself to fix it. And that's the whole foundation of therapeutic hypnosis. You fix yourself. I'm not going to fix you. You don't have to look outside of yourself, because who better to know what the problem is than you? And more importantly, what to do about it, how to fix you. Who better to know than you? You know what you need. And so these techniques and these tools that we use in hypnotherapy allow you to do the healing work that you know you need, even if it's all unconscious. You know what you need to do. And that's why we kind of quiet down that conscious level mind with the sleep and getting sleepy and all that stuff. We're quieting down that conscious level mind, getting out of beta brainwave state, altering your state of consciousness, which you know how to do, because you were just in that boring meeting last week and you started staring out the window daydreaming. That's all we're going to do. And then track through feeling states, maybe that anxiety. I have had people usually we have a consultation call, make sure it's a good fit, talk about what you want to work on and what hypnotherapy is all about and how it can help. And then when you make an appointment, I'll send you an intake form. And on that intake form, I've had people write 7, 8 really detailed, specific paragraphs on what happened in their life and where they hurt, which is great. That's fantastic. I've had other people just write one word, anxiety. Fine. That's what we work on, because you know what that means. You have focused and pinpointed the hurt and pain or the issue you want to work on, and it's anxiety. Fine. That's exactly what we will work on. And you know what that means to you. And your subconscious mind will heal that, because that's your intention. It's your responsibility, and that becomes very empowering, because you don't have to look outside of yourself anymore. Blaming I know economy sucks sometimes, and I know things can be rough, especially with family, and parents get older and kids get older and all that, and sometimes there's bad news from the doctor and things, and that some of those things are out of your control. But if you keep blaming those things outside of yourself, there's no way you can change, and there's no way you can become the person you want to be. And so if you take that responsibility, and sometimes that hurts to think, okay, to stop being a victim, because they did hurt you, and you weren't the one who decided to be born into an abusive house. But if you take responsibility for dealing with that trauma and that hurt and that pain, and you're allowed to get rid of it. You're allowed to heal. You have that power. You have the right. You have and you have the ability to do it. And it doesn't have to take months and years. It doesn't have to. That's how powerful you are.
Listen, man, it's a very empowering message. I appreciate your time here. I appreciate the wisdom,
thank you,
the
Cody.
insights.
I know we went back and forth about scheduling and had to reschedule a couple of times, and so I appreciate your patience, and I really have been looking forward to talking with you, Cody. I appreciate being on your show.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm going to stop the video hangout for just a second.
Sure.
I'm going to explain to you just a couple details, but yeah, definitely appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, Cody.
Hey, everybody. Listen, I really appreciate you guys tuning in today, man. If you like the content, if you found this episode useful, you can visit us on social media. That's YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, Amazon Music, Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, and Google and Apple Podcasts. There you can like our videos, follow, subscribe, and share. And again, we appreciate it. We'll see you next time.